What's up, NAIA Report Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome back to the Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 47. Pretty sure I got the number right this time. 47 gonna be coming to you here, and very cold Monday morning for almost everybody in the country, if I'm not mistaken. A lot to talk about. Pretty jam-packed episode again here. We're gonna touch on obviously my polls reaction because we weren't able to do that on Friday, as well as some weekend recaps. And then I picked the 5 conference races that I'm most intrigued in terms of national tournament berths. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute here, but we're going to start with our polls reaction. Obviously, that's the oldest thing. 3 quick points, honestly. Happy to see Freed Hardeman finally in the top 2. I think that it's about time that they are there. I still think they should be number 1. I'm going to stay in on that until they shouldn't be anymore, and I just feel like they are the best team in the country right now. I think Dakota West needs to be higher than Campbellsville. I think Campbellsville needs to be lower. I'm going to rephrase that. Dakota West should be higher. Campbellsville should be lower. Whether that's Campbellsville being outside the top 10, especially after you lost Lindsey Wilson. And I'm not saying Lindsey Wilson's a bad team. Don't get me wrong. But you've had too many of those hiccups. You've had too many of those situations where Campbellsville has dropped some games they maybe shouldn't have. And for Dakota Wesleyan, yes, you had dropped some games early in the season, but since then, you have been one of the best teams in the country. I think Dakota Wesleyan has an argument to be well into the top 10, not barely in the top 10. They're number 9 right now. And when we talk about the fact that Dakota Wesleyan has a head-to-head win, the first head-to-head win against Campbellsville of the season, you got to be able to do that. Even if it's Campbellsville coming down and Dakota Wesleyan 8-7, whatever the case is, they have to be higher, and Campbellsville should be lower. And I do believe Dakota Wesleyan should be over Campbellsville in the grand scheme of things. The final one is I agree with the William Carey move up before the Loyola loss. Before the Loyola loss, even after the Loyola loss, I still think that William Carey should have been in top 15. Now we're talking about a life loss as well, so they're probably going to drop down maybe even outside the top 20. We'll see when that time does come. But I do agree with that movement up by the committee, even though William Carey did lose to Loyola before the polls came out. I still think that's the right thing to do because you can't penalize them. They should have already been there to begin with. If they were already in there, then we have a different conversation, but they weren't. So therefore, I kind of understand why they moved up. Those are really only my quick 3 hits on the polls. I'm not going to go too much into them. I do think I saw everything else. I saw the vision. I'm not saying everybody saw the vision. I'm not saying everybody was happy with the vision, but I do think I understand it from the most part, and we'll keep going from there. Weekend recap. 2 things, really. And they're both from the Crossroads. I think the Crossroads had a very interesting week. I think the St. Francis Cougars have kryptonite, and they are in the form of the Indiana Wesleyan Wildcats. St. Francis lost 1 game all season up to this point to Indiana Wesleyan. They now have lost 2 games all season up to this point, both to Indiana Wesleyan. And this game was a lot more impressive because it was at St. Francis. I've been down here at length talking about how the Wildcats on the road and the Wildcats at home, 2 very different teams. For this game, they were the same team because it was another situation where the 3-point line was the biggest issue for this game. In the first game, St. Francis had no threes, not a single one made out of 7 attempts. In this game, they had 6 made, which was great, but I will double that at 12. Mind you, that's, I believe, the same number that they had in the previous game as well. For whatever reason, when the St. Francis plays Indiana Wesleyan, they do not shoot the ball well from the 3-point line, and the Wildcats do nothing but shoot the ball well from the 3-point line. It's a very big win in a game, and honestly a stretch where Indiana Wesleyan's kind of turned things around here, y'all. I've talked about it at length here. Keep an eye on the Wildcats. Is this the same Wildcats team of the past? No, absolutely not. I think anybody can tell you that. But that doesn't mean that this Wildcat team still is not dangerous. So it does not mean this Wildcat team should be overlooked. I think, there was a time where I looked at this team might be unranked. It might not make the playoffs in the Crossroads. We've gone past that now. This Indiana Wesleyan team is the definition of a dark horse contender. The Indiana Wesleyan team is the definition of a team that you don't want to see in the playoffs. And this might be a team that St. Francis sees in the playoffs. And if I'm Indiana Wesleyan, I have no fear of St. Francis right now. Why would I? I've beaten you at home and on the road. Now, I'm probably going to have to play you at your place anyways, and I've already done that. Yes, I get it. It's hard to beat 3 teams in one season. I understand that. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. And dare I say, I would almost bet right now, the day of this episode coming out, the day I'm recording, I think Indiana Wesleyan goes 3-0 more likely than St. Francis gets that win in the playoffs. I do. I don't think that the St. Francis Cougars want to see Indiana Wesleyan. They are their kryptonite. And so what will happen when that time does come? Because something tells me the script writers are going to make sure that that situation happens, whether it's the first round, second round, whatever the case is, it's going to happen. The other note I want to talk about from the weekend, that kind of a little bit longer than the weekend, the Taylor Trojans are falling, y'all. It's not looking great. Before the calendar turned to 2026, I was talking about Taylor looking like a great team. They just beat top 25 Indiana Tech. They are sitting undefeated in the Crossroads. They had the big game against Marion coming up that I didn't think they were going to win, but it was a good test. Since 2026 started, the team started with a 4-game losing streak, then got 2 games that they should have already got anyway, so you did what you're supposed to do there. Then dropped the last 2 of the month and are now sitting at 6th in the conference after a 2-6 January. The team that was averaging 77 points going into January is now averaging 67.6 points in the last 8 games. If I take those 2 games that they should have won, those are games you should have won. I'm not going to credit you for doing what you're supposed to do. If I take those 2 games out of the averages, that brings the average down to 62.6. So in the games that matter, in the games against playoff teams that you've played this month, you barely put up 60 points a night. A team that was averaging almost 80 going into January. Now, slumps happen. Now, things will not always be rainbows and sunshine. I get that. But when it's offense and defense, that's where I start raising concerns. Because defensively, going into January, this Trojans team had only allowed opponents to score over 70 4 times all season going into January. Now, ending January, going into February, they've now allowed teams to do that 10 times this season. They allowed 6 opponents, I should say, to score over 70 points in 1 month. While in a 3-month span, what is that? October, November, December, in 3 months, you allowed them to do it 4 times, There is a sizable slump here. There is a concern here for Taylor. Do I think they're going to get it right? I hope so. Right now you're sitting at 6th. You're tied, I believe, with Bethel, who just beat you this past weekend in a pretty handed fashion. You're looking a little concerning. I'm not going to lie to you. It can be a blip. It can be a hiccup. But I will say this. Depending on how the season ends for Taylor, good or bad, I'm going to point to this 8-game stretch as the reason for either they get it right, they lock down, they hunker down, and they just go on a great run. Maybe they don't win the Crossroads, but they do a really good thing. They get into the national tournament. They make a nice run at it, whatever the case is. Or if they don't make the tournament, or they drop out in the first round of the Crossroads, whatever the case is, I'm going to say these 8 games was the start of that. This 8 games, this rock bottom of your season, will determine the outcome of your season, good or bad. It's either the moment that you realize we got to get our stuff together, and when we did, or the moment that we could not stop the bleeding, we could not plug the holes in quick enough, and the ship sank. I'm very interested to see what Taylor's going to do. Got a lot of games lined up for them to try and do it. You've got a month of February. It's conference tournament month now, y'all. By the end of this month, the regular season will be over. February 21st is the end of the regular season for everybody in the country. And then we start with conference playoffs. We're here, y'all. We are here. I believe the first tournament game is on that Tuesday after the 21st. I believe it's going to be an HBCU conference tournament. The Sun is going to finish in that by the end of the February month as a whole. One of the first conferences that's going to be done. It's all here, y'all. We're all ready to go. Teams have about 5 to 6 games left, depending on your conference schedule. If you got to do any makeup games, whatever it is, you got about 5 or 6 games left. Taylor is one of those teams. How is Taylor going to respond to a 2-6 month will determine the rest of their season moving forward. Now we're going to talk about the 5 most interesting conference races for national tournament at-large berths. I'm going to throw that caveat in there as well. What I did was, obviously with it being the end of the month, and by the time you guys are seeing this, the end of the month, start of a new month, by the time you guys are seeing this, we would have either already posted or we're about to post, spoiler, our conference standings across the country going into February. Right? Like we always do at the end of every month, we kind of recap where conference standings are at. When I was looking through that, something kind of rose my eyebrows. Oh, this conference, that's interesting. Okay. So I decided, while I'm trying to think about what I want this episode to be about, I was like, okay, let's do conference races, but not for regular season championships because we already touched on that, and I will touch on that again towards the end of the month once things kind of hunker down a little bit more, and we got some interesting ones to end the season. So that's going to be in the near future, but I wanted to talk about a different angle. I wanted to say conferences who could get multiple teams with at large berths, how can the conference standings shake things up, right? So I went through 5. The Chicagoland, which will be the first, the Red River, Southern States, the WHAC, and the SAC, right? So I'm going to start with the Chicagoland. The reason I want to go with Chicagoland really is because this last weekend, Viterbo beat St. Francis of Illinois. St. Francis of Illinois is now third they're second, but they are, I believe, 2 games below Olivia Nazarene, who right now holds the number 1 seed. St. Francis, I believe, is also tied with St. Xavier. IU South Bend has a little say in this because they have that win over St. Francis. So there's a lot of interesting things here. But the reason, the storyline I'm looking at with this group is, and I think it's a fair thing to make, will St. Francis make the national tournament, yo? Like, let me just break it down. Chicagoland has more than 10 teams. So you got 2 at-large berths. Cool. If Olivia Nazarene wins the regular season championship, or if another team not named St. Francis wins the regular season championship, there goes 1 berth, right? And this is a conference that if the regular season champion and the conference champion are the same player, the same team, then the second seed gets the second auto bid. Well, there's a world where St. Francis doesn't get the second seed, y'all. There's a world. You already lost 1 to IU South Bend. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about St. Xavier. That game is left. There's a St. Xavier versus St. Francis game lined up to end the regular season in the Chicagoland. You can't talk about a bigger game than that, because that could very well be winner takes the second auto bid. Because do I think Olivia Nazarene can win the conference championship? Yes. Do I think St. Francis can win? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we got to be realistic here. There's a world where if I'm going field or St. Francis, I'm going the field. I really am. Because at the beginning of the year, I didn't think so. But then, you lose to IU South Bend. Everybody has that one game. Then you lose to Viterbo. You already lost to Olivia Nazarene. So why would I not think that they could do it again? There is a world where St. Francis is not going to make the national tournament because, so I look at the RPI rankings. The top 3 teams in the Chicagoland, St. Francis, St. Xavier, Olivia Nazarene, their RPI rankings are 60, 63, and 62. I said before, if you're above 40, pretty safe bet to get an at-large bid from an RPI standpoint. 41 to 50, tough. 50 to 60, you're a bubble team, but maybe less of a bubble team than you want to be. If you're 16 below, you kind of need an auto bid from somewhere to really get in there. Again, still a lot of RPI rankings left to be had, but from the RPI standpoint, they're not really looking good. Now, from the ARC standpoints, which some argue is more important, St. Francis is 7, St. Xavier's not even ranked, and Olivia Nazarene is the last one in the North ARC. So from an ARC standpoint, St. Francis has a really good chance here. But those ARC rankings came out 2 weeks ago now. Before they lost to Olivia Nazarene, before they lost to Viterbo. So they're not 7 anymore. At least they shouldn't be, in my opinion. You're looking at least outside of the top 10 in the North ARC, and Olivia Nazarene's going to have to move up a little bit here, y'all. And then from a quad standpoint, St. Francis is the only team with a quad 1 win out of St. Xavier and Olivia Nazarene. Both of them are 0-4. All 3 teams have lost at least 1 game in quad 2. Olivia Nazarene has the best record from a 5-1 standpoint. St. Xavier lost a quad 3 game. Oh, excuse me. No, I lied. I was reading this wrong. Olivia Nazarene is undefeated in the quad 2. They're 2-0, have the best record. Then St. Xavier has the best record in terms of wins in the quad 3, 6-1. St. Francis is 1-0, so they haven't lost one, but they only played 1 game. And then from a quad 4 standpoint, obviously St. Francis has 12-0. So St. Xavier 0-4, 1-1, 6-1, 5-0 in quads 1 through 4. St. Francis 1-0, 2-1, 1-0, 12-0 in terms of quads 1 through 4. And Olivia Nazarene 0-4, 2-0, 5-1, 6-0. I get that St. Francis is 12-0 in quad 4, but I don't like that. Like, you got to have more games in those other quads. There's no way that St. Xavier and Olivia Nazarene combined have almost as many games played through quads 1 and 3 than you have quads 4 wins. And I get it. You're going to play quad 4 teams, but 12? I don't know. I just don't know if the quad record is going to help St. Francis. So that's why I say there's a world where St. Francis, they're looking at something that they maybe didn't think about at the beginning of the year, not being in the national tournament. Or if they are, It'll probably be a low seed, y'all. I'm not going to lie to you. Keep an eye on the Chicagoland because that game, St. Xavier versus St. Francis, to end the regular season, that will start a very interesting run for that next week or so. Because St. Xavier wins that game, they move into the second seed. St. Francis now is looking at the two ways of getting into the national tournament: auto bid, winning the conference championship, at large bid. If St. Francis wins that game and gets to the second seed, you're looking at three ways. You're looking at conference champion, you're looking at second seed auto bid, at large, high percentage chance. Can they get up to Olivia Nazarene? I've seen crazy things happen in the Chicagoland this year, but I think that's the least likely outcome. I think there's a higher chance of dropping to 3 than it is for them going up to 1. It's a 2-game lead right now, and I think Olivia Nazarene has a very, very, very favorable matchup left. Some tough teams, don't get me wrong, but the Tigers look to be in full control of their own destiny and of the destiny of some of these other teams in the Chicagoland. Now we're going to head over to the Red River. And the reason that I wanted to go Red River, talked about it before, they're the only team in the country where the second auto bid in their conference is the second highest ranked ARC team in the South. So what that means is, I'm looking at 3 teams: LSU Shreveport, San Antonio, A&M San Antonio, and then Texarkana. All of them are separated about 3 games, but again, the ARCs are what matter. LSU Shreveport right now is number 1 in the ARC, right? San Antonio is number 6, Texarkana number 10. I do believe LSU Shreveport will win the conference championship in the Red River. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. So they're in. As far as I'm concerned, as long as LSU Shreveport stays number 1 in the South ARC, they are going to the national tournament, whether they make it to the conference tournament or whether they win the whole thing. Because from a standpoint of the rules, seedings almost don't matter in the Red River. They don't. Because, again, if LSU Shreveport is the number 1 team in the South ARC, but they're the worst team in the Red River, obviously that can't happen. But if that was the case, by the rules, LSU Shreveport would be the second auto bid team in, right? If LSU Shreveport does what I expect them to do and win the conference championship, I'm looking at San Antonio and Texarkana. That game, there is 1 game left. That game could very well determine who is going to be the second auto bid team. Because, and obviously the playoffs do matter because they will take the playoffs into account before the final arcs come out. So there's 1 regular season game left, but there's possibly 2 games left. Because if San Antonio beats Texarkana, right, and Texarkana drops out in the playoff race before they can get back to San Antonio to back against A&M San Antonio and get their get back, it's a pretty safe bet that San Antonio will be the second auto bid team from the Red River to go. Same thing for Texarkana. If Texarkana wins and San Antonio drops out before they can play them again in the playoffs and try and get the get-right game, get the get-back game, pretty safe bet that Texarkana is going to make it. That's why I say this conference is very interesting because you're looking at a situation where if you lose to your opponent, and by opponents I mean Texarkana and Texas A&M San Antonio, you're praying to see them again in the conference championship. Because I just don't believe, if you told me Field or LSU Shreveport, I'm going LSU Shreveport. They've been too dominant in the Red River. They're undefeated right now in the Red River. I can't ignore that. And we're talking about February now, y'all. I can't ignore that. So I'm looking at who's that second auto bid. How tight is that race? It's very tight. I do think Texas A&M San Antonio and Texarkana are very national tournament worthy teams. And the reason that I say berths and whatnot, do I think the Red River can get all 3 of them? No. Unfortunately, I do not. That's why I'm focusing on that second auto bid. Because A&M San Antonio does have a pretty good RPI. And Texarkana is not a bad RPI. But I just don't think that they're going to give both of them. I don't think so. I think they give 1, and whoever that 1 is the one. And the reason I say 1 is because they're only giving 1 because LSU Shreveport has the other. I'm telling y'all, LSU Shreveport is going to get in one way or another. The only way I see all 3 getting in is if San Antonio or Texarkana takes the higher seed from LSU Shreveport, and then the other one wins the conference championship, because then LSU Shreveport is going to get in with an at-large. LSU Shreveport gets into the national tournament, y'all. I just don't see that not happening. My question is, do San Antonio or Texarkana get in with that second auto bid? Which one gets that? Whoever wins these next two games, probably just this next game, but I'm expecting them to play again in the playoffs, will be a better team in the ARC standings, and therefore will get that second auto bid. So keep an eye in the Red River between Texas A&M San Antonio and Texarkana. With that game lined up here, San Antonio already beat them once. They already beat Texarkana by 8 the first time. If San Antonio sweeps the regular season matchup, it's going to be a pretty safe bet. It might be the Jaguars and the LSU Shreveport team going to the national tournament to represent the Red River. Next three. First up, Southern States. Can the Southern States get all four of these teams in that I'm about to name? 4 national tournament worthy teams. Worthy teams. William Carey, Loyola, UT Southern. Faulkner's the last one. The reason I put Faulkner last. Because one's going to be a regular season champion. Loyola, cool. Tournament champion. William Carey, cool. UT Southern is 7th in the ARCs as of the time I'm recording this. And is top 10. Dare I say top 5? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure top 10 for sure, 100%. In RPIs. That resume, beautiful. Plus you have a win over Bethel. Plus you have some top-notch quad 2 wins as well. Your record is impeccable. Not undefeated, but impeccable. Your top 3 in the Southern States. The resume speaks for itself. Those 3, I think, are locks. I think they're locks. But can the Southern States get 4? Ugh. Faulkner's that bubble team, y'all. The RPI is great, but they are 10th in the ARC. They're 10th in the ARC. And they still have Loyola and William Carey left. If Faulkner had the UT Southern game left, I think we could be talking about something very interesting. But they don't. They've got William Carey and Loyola. So there's a world where they lose those 2 games, and things aren't looking great. Things are looking great. If I'm going to pull up the Southern States, I'm going to pull up Faulkner's schedule because I need to see how they did against UT Southern, because that also may sway me a little bit here. Faulkner's been one of the best teams in the country. They've been receiving votes almost the whole year. The first time they played UT Southern, they won. That actually helps. But then they split with UT Southern. They split at their place. If they would have beat that UT Southern game, that would have been a lot more enticing. It's tough. It's a tough sell, y'all. It's a tough sell. I think from the other side of things, too, and when you look at the ARC, and this is why I say the ARCs are important, it's going to be hard because you guys might be thinking, oh, well, if they're top 10 in the East ARC, they should be in. It's a pretty safe bet. And you would think. But also remember, there's going to be other teams that are going to get in automatically below them. That's why I say they're a bubble team. Faulkner's a bubble team because there's some teams below them that will jump them because of their conference. For example, ahead of Faulkner right now, Bethel, Freed-Hardeman, Campbellsville, William Carey, Lindsey Wilson, Loyola, UT Southern, Cumberland, Southeastern. Okay, that's 9 teams, right? 9 teams. Below Faulkner, Georgetown, St. Thomas, Cumberland of Tennessee, Kaiser, Milligan, Bryant. Milligan and Bryant will already get in. Those are 2 auto bids from the AAC. So that's 2 teams that are already going to get in over Faulkner. Kaiser, they have a chance for an at-large. I think that's a great argument to be made between them and Faulkner. Okay, 50-50. Cumberland of Tennessee, I don't think they get in if they're going to be the worst team in the Mid-South. They need to get a couple wins here. So, okay, safe there. St. Thomas, same thing as Faulkner. I think you got a real case to be made. And the thing about the Sun is, don't let St. Thomas or Kaiser win the conference, because now Southeast is already getting in over you. They beat you head-to-head. So they're already getting in over you. They're higher in the ARCs, and they got a better RPI. So don't let one of the beta stealers in the Sun, being St. Thomas or Kaiser, get that conference auto bid, because now that's a bid stealer that is going to hurt your chances of getting into the national tournament. And then Georgetown, again, I would give Georgetown over Faulkner. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out of the 6 teams below Faulkner in the ARCs, Georgetown, I think, is a safe bet over them. St. Thomas could be a bid stealer. Coming to Tennessee, I think I'd take Faulkner over them. Kaiser could be a bid stealer. And then Milligan and Bryan are auto bids. So you're looking at a percentage standpoint, only one team is a safe bet over you to get in. And you've got 2 bid stealers looming right now. So that's why I say Faulkner is the bubble team, right? for the Southern States in terms of can they get all 4 in. I think the first 3 are in. William Carey, Loyola, UT Southern. I think they're in. If Faulkner splits with William Carey and Loyola, doesn't matter which one, or dare I say go 2-0 against them, all bets are off now, y'all. All bets are off. Because now things look interesting. The arcs are going to look real interesting. Maybe UT Southern now becomes the number 1 team in the Southern States in terms of the arc. And then could Faulkner jump one of the 2 and William Carey Loyola? Like now we're looking at some interesting dynamics. But right now, the way it looks, Faulkner is a bubble team because a bubble team for the Southern States in terms of getting all 4 in. I'm not saying that Faulkner is going to be a team in the grand scheme of things to be a bubble team. I think they're a pretty safe bet with some other teams across the country. But even still, that argument can be made the other way. If you're a bubble team in your own conference, how can you not be a bubble team in the entirety of the NAIA? When you talk about in the other arcs, we just said, let's just say for argument's sake, in the East, those 9 teams above them make it, plus, let's say, plus the 2 Milligan and Bryan, so now you're up to 11. And I'll throw in, and I'll leave it like that, just like that, 11. Well, in the Midwest, I'm looking Dordt, Evangel, Friends, Dakota Wesleyan, Concordia, Mid-American Nazarene, Briarcliff, Columbia, okay, at least those 8. So now we're looking at 19, Then St. Francis, Marion, Rio Grande, Spring Arbor. Okay, I'll stop at 4 there. So that's 23. South, Ellis, Shreveport, Langston. I'll stop at those 2. 25. Dakota West, Dakota State, Eastern Oregon, Lewis and Clark, Montana Tech, Corbin, Rocky Mountain, College of Idaho, Carroll, Oregon Tech, Southern Oregon. That's 10. So over 30 teams we've gotten to right now. That's almost half of the national tournament field have already been decided real quick right here. Right? Those are all teams that I feel like would get in over Faulkner. The back end, again, haven't talked about some of these other teams that got a good case to be made. Some teams that have beaten Southeastern, who Faulkner has a loss to. Some teams that have beaten UT Southern that Faulkner has a loss to. William Carey and Loyola. Yes, granted, not so much William Carey, but Loyola, I just feel like Faulkner they might be and as I'm talking myself through it, they might be a bubble team in a lot of different aspects. I don't know if the Southern States can get 4 in. I don't know if the East Arc is going to be able to get that many teams in out of the teams that I've labeled here. And in terms of the national tournament, there's a lot of teams that have a good case for Faulkner, maybe even better. So Faulkner, I think you need to get at least one of these last 2 games between Loyola and William Carey to give yourself a great resume booster going into the tournament. Again, you win a tournament, all this is mute. All this is moot. There's no question about it. Because if Faulkner wins the Southern States, they get all 4 in. They get all 4 in. You can't leave William Carey out. You can't leave Loyola. You can't leave UT Southern. You can't. You can't, y'all. I'm sorry, but you can. Loyola was the last undefeated team in the country, and barring a losing streak that I don't see happening, they're going to be fine. Loyola is probably going to get to at least the semifinals in the Southern States. They've had one of the best RPIs in the country. They're one of the top teams in the ARC. Done. UT Southern, one of the best RPIs in the country, wire to wire. They were number 1, I think, at one point. You've got plenty of resume builders on your schedule. You beat Faulkner already, at least once, right? Your arc is good enough. If Faulkner wins the conference championship for the Southern States, they all 4 teams get in. 100%. No question about it. Next one, the WHAC. Do only 2 teams get in if Indiana Tech wins out? That's what I mean. Indiana Tech's a pretty safe bet. They're a pretty safe bet. The WHAC, I'm looking at them kind of like I looked at the Red River. Indiana Tech is in. I'm looking at Rochester Christian. Who is the second one? Because the 3 teams are separated by 2 games in the top 3 standings. Rochester Christian is 11th in the ARC. They have 1 game left against Lords. Lords is a bubble team. They are like Faulkner. Because when I bring up the ARCs in the north, St. Francis, Marion, Rio Grande, Spring Arbor, Huntington, Taylor, St. Francis, Illinois, Indiana Tech. Indiana Tech is at the 8th. Then Shawnee State, Bethel, Rochester Christian at 11. What helps Rochester Christian is they have a win over Indiana Tech. Now, Indiana Tech obviously got their get back. We don't need to talk about that. But that win will help. Because if Rochester Christian beats Lords to end the season, end that game that they have left, I don't see Lords getting in without another conference championship run. I don't. I think it's between Rochester Christian and Lords. And in the Red River, I was kind of up and down. Didn't really know which way to go. in the WHAC, I would go Rochester Christian over Lourdes. I know Lourdes has done this before, so we can't overlook them, and they did it as a 5th seed. You can't even, you're technically better off this year than they were last year. But if you're a 3rd seed, you're going to have to play Rochester Christian. You already lost them once. I don't know. I like Rochester Christian a lot more than Lourdes right now. It'll be tough. And Rochester Christian already has a win over Indiana Tech, so it's like I can't really the resume doesn't favor Lourdes. If Lourdes wins out the conference championship, that's the only way I see them going in. I don't see all 3 going in for the WHAC. I don't. I think the WHAC only gets 2. The question is, who will that second one be with Indiana Tech? Indiana Tech, I think they win a regular season championship. They punch your ticket in, easy money. As far as the other spot, I'm curious between the 2, and I'm right now leaning towards Rochester Christian. Lourdes will have something to say about that. I think that game's going to be very, very interesting, very, very enticing. But in the end, I'm going Rochester Christian from a resume standpoint, and that I think Indiana Tech will get, if they don't get the conference championship, you look at the 2nd seed, right now that's Rochester Christian. You know what I mean? So let me double check that just to make sure, because I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I'm pretty sure that is who the 2nd seed in the WHAC stands as right now. Actually, Lourdes. Excuse me, it's Lourdes. So, but I do believe Rochester Christian will get that win on Lourdes coming up. So you're looking at them being, if that was the very next game, you're looking at them being 14-3 for Lourdes, 14-3 for Rochester Christian. You're tied up there. You're tied up there, right? And in terms of the game that they already played, the last time these 2 teams played, Lourdes did win. They did win, but it was at home. It was 72-54. Lourdes, since then, though, they've dropped some games. They've lost to Cleary. They obviously lost to Indiana Tech. They were riding a very good winning streak going into this Wednesday's game against Rochester Christian, obviously including getting their get back against Cleary. Like, this Wednesday game in the WHAC is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm pretty sure for the Red River, that game against Texarkana and A&M San Antonio is this weekend on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of games lined up this week that are going to be big in terms of seeding. And if you're looking for that 2nd seed, for that 2nd auto bid, in terms of resume builder, if you're looking at situations like in the ARC for the Red River, trying to get you in a better positioning, keep your eyes glued for this first week of February, because it'll set up a lot for the last week of February. Last conference, the SAC. Same thing. I think we've got a safe 3 for the SAC. But can we get all 4? And the reason that now I'm looking at an interesting thing for the SAC, and they're kind of the reason I wanted to talk about some of these conferences. John Brown upset Receiving Votes USAO this past weekend. USAO lived in the paint, 50 paint points, but John Brown lived beyond the 3-point line. They were 13 threes. USAO only had 3. Rochester Christian was able to, USAO, even though they won the paint battle, John Brown was able to keep it relatively close. I think Sarah Snodgrass showed why she's arguably the player of the year in terms of putting up a 13 and 19 rebound game while playing 37 minutes. Plus, Abby Sanders had a double-double, 13 and 11. It's a tough loss for USAO, but it's one of those games where it's a tough pill to swallow. You know what I mean? You forced 25 turnovers from your opponents. You shot not bad from the field at 37%. They just couldn't deal with John Brown having maybe their best offensive night, shooting 49% from the field, having 4 players in double-figure scoring, and Sarah, Abby, Kaline Ferguson with 23, and Oakley Lofton with 12. It was just a rough night. You know, it happens. And they weren't the only team in the country that had a rough night in terms of dealing with somebody who just offensively could not miss on that afternoon. But when we look at the rest of the standing now, the top three seeds are separated by 1 game. That's Langston holds a 1-game lead over Nelson and Receiving Votes Mid-American Christian. You look over at the next 3 seeds, USAO, College of Ozarks, and Wayland Baptist. They're all separated by 1 game, right? If I look at this as a whole, there's a lot of national tournament teams in here. There's a lot. I'm looking at Langston, MACU, Nelson, USAO, College of Ozarks, Wayland Baptist, and John Brown, which are the next 2 after. They're going to need the auto bid for sure. But I'm looking at that's 5 teams that just labeled off. 5 teams. No way the SAC gets all 5. I think they get all 4. I think Langston's a safe bet. I think Nelson's a safe bet. And I think Mid-American Christian. You are all in. USAO and College of Ozarks, those are the 2 that are on the bubble. But I mean on the bubble, I don't mean like there's 1 spot left for 2 teams. I mean there might not be another spot left for these two teams because USAO has now had some bad upset losses. I say bad in terms of resume. Bethany, it's a tough loss. John Brown, tough loss. College of Ozarks, they've had some rough losses as well throughout the season. When you look at the ARC standings, got to always use these ARC standings. You look at the Midwest, you look at the South. Langston's in. USAO is was third in the first ARCs. Like, that was a really good place for them to be. They're going to drop down significantly, in my opinion. Mid-American Christian was fourth. College of Ozarks was fifth. I think they're going to drop down as well. You know, you're looking at a situation now where I think Nelson should overtake probably College of Ozarks. Mid-American Christians to overtake USAO. Like, there's a world where those two teams in College of Ozarks and USAO drop pretty far down the ARC standings, especially with other teams in not just their conference, but in their ARC doing very well. Wiley, Oakwood, A&M San Antonio, Texarkana. It's very interesting to see what the South is going to look like when these next ARC rankings come out. But, and again, a conference that has multiple teams, so you're looking at 2 auto bids plus 1. I do think you get 3. I think 3 is a safe bet in the SAC. If you're betting on if the over-under line is 3.5 and you're going with the over, you're banking on a lot. Because even still, I'd go as far as to say this. I think Langston's the safest one out of all 5 of these teams that I've talked about so far. I know Langston's kind of been under the radar. I think that's scary. If the Lions are an under the radar team, good luck with that. But if MACU and Nelson don't have good playoff runs, they don't make the tournament. I don't think they make the tournament. I know their RPI is great. I know their ARC standings are pretty solid right now, but you know they haven't. Their resume isn't concrete like some of these other teams are if they don't win the conference championship. Now, obviously, the regular season championship is a little bit different, but I don't think the USAO College of Ozarks. That's where they stand right now. But there's a world where those two can flip with Nelson and MACU. I'm not saying MACU and Nelson are locked in. I'm saying 3 is a safe bet. I'll even say 2 because, again, I think Langston's a lock. 2 more are safe bets. You have 4 teams to pick from. That's my point, right? And if you throw Langston in there, it's 3 spots with 5 teams to pick from. So 2 are going to get left out. I just don't believe that you're going to be able to get 4 or all 5. I don't think so. I think you got too many good teams around the country that have really good wins all year that are going to continue to have more good wins all year. You can have some bid stealers that are going to get in because even in the South, I talked about 1 through 10, that 11 seed is Haskell, which means the CAC is in the South, which means what? That's 2 more auto bids that are going to be taken from some of these other at-large teams. The CAC is going to have, if it's Haskell, then you got Georgia Gwinnett. It's my pick, honestly, but Haskell, Georgia Gwinnett, Florida National, Washington Adventist, whoever comes out of there, you got 2. Those are the 2 spots that could go to the SAC. Not saying that they should, because again, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to have a lot of these teams, and I'll kind of end it here. I'm talking about at-large bids and all that kind of stuff. The only thing I ever argue for, if you're going, is the whole 2 auto bid thing, right? And I get it. I'm for the rule, but that's the only thing that I really will argue about. It's like, it is semi-unfair for some conferences, but at the same time, I get it. You have a lot of teams in these conferences. You gotta need 2. Some people are gonna argue about certain conferences having 2 that don't deserve 2. It's the world we live in. Do I think that the CAC is a better conference in the Southern states? The SAC, excuse me. No, I don't. I think the SAC has better teams than the CAC. I think if you take any SAC team and put them in the CAC, they would be the number 1 contenders in that conference. With that being said, the CAC does have some really good teams. Georgia Gwinnett is going to be a national tournament team. Haskell has been a national tournament team. Florida National, same thing. They have been a national tournament team, and they've gone and they've competed. But you can't get mad at that. You can't get mad. I know a lot of people that will get mad at certain things about like that. I'm not one of them. As far as I'm concerned, the CAC is going to have 2 auto bid teams. You know that. You want to get an auto bid? Go win your conference championship. Go win your conference regular season championship. Because in the same breath, if you flip it, and I'll use the Sun as an example, even the Mid-South as an example. People want to go at the Mid-South. Oh, they have a small conference. It's not fair. They're going to get 1 auto bid. They know that. That's why they go out and schedule the conferences and the games that they do. Because they only get 1 auto bid. If they got 2, I guarantee you their conference RPI as a whole would not be as high as it is because they don't need to schedule such tough games. Because they know whoever the regular season champion is going to get is 1, and we got another one. Done. But they only have 1. Because you're not going to, they're going to, you can't expect them not to go schedule hard, because if they don't schedule hard, they don't get all six or seven or whatever the number is in. People like to get mad at the Mid-South. Oh, they're just beating up on each other, whatever the case is. So they went out and scheduled tough teams. Beginning of the year, you had Bethel, Indiana Wesleyan, Freed Hardeman going out and playing against top teams across the country. Georgetown, Commonwealth of Tennessee, everybody in the Mid-South goes out and finds the best to beat the best so that they have the RPI that they have. When we look at the RPI standings right now, and those kind of turn into a Mid-South rant, but it frustrates me when people say things and they don't understand why things are the way they are. The top 10 RPI rating teams, meaning strength of schedule, wins, all that kind of stuff. This is the order. Freed Hardeman, Bethel, St. Francis, Indiana, Dort, Marion, Campbellsville, Rio Grande, UT Southern, Lindsey Wilson, William Carey. 4 out of the top 10 in RPI in terms of strength of schedule and all this other stuff are from the Mid-South. And when we look at the strength of schedule, Freed Hardeman has the number 1 strength of schedule, Bethel has the number 4, Campbellsville is number 8, Lindsey Wilson's number 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the top 10 in terms of strength of schedule come from the Mid-South. And people are going to say, oh, that's because they're playing against each other. Yeah, and then who they're playing are playing against each other. You look at the top teams, Bethel played UT Southern. Freed Hardeman has played some of these top teams around the country as well. Lindsey Wilson, same thing. So understand that part of it. I get the Mid-South is going to get a lot of hate, and I understand that. And yet again, I love the Mid-South. It's a great conference. I love watching their basketball. But there's a reason that they get what they get. They've earned that. People are going to say, oh, it's a small conference, it's easy. It's not easy. Because if it was easy, I promise you the Mid-South not getting all these teams in because they have a small conference. They're not. If the AAC had a conference that was that deep, they would get all 6. They would get 6 in. The Southern State of the SAC, I just mentioned them. There's a world, I know it's not going to happen, but there's a world where I could see all 5 of these teams getting in. They all have an argument to be made. Now, Nelson, Langston, USAO, Mid-American Christian, and College of the Ozarks all have a chance to get in. They all could get in. And if they do, I love it. I'm not against that. But I'm being realistic. And the realisticness about it is the Mid-South has better RPI standings. They have a better quad standing. They have a better arc. They have better things. So they're going to get a lot more of these teams in. The Mid-South will probably have another year where all but one get in. It's the way we live in. I know I went off on a little tangent there, but I say all that in saying the 5 conferences I just mentioned are conferences that I just feel who we thought was coming out is in jeopardy of changing at this point. In the SAC, I had Langston. I had Nelson. Didn't really have USAL. Didn't have Mid-American Christian. College of the Ozarks, no. In the WHAC, I had Indiana Tech, Rochester Christian. That's now up in limbo. Southern States, I had Loyola William Carey. Didn't have UT Southern. Well, I loved UT Southern in there from a conference standpoint. I don't know if they're going to get an at-large bid, but they look at an at-large bid right now. Faulkner, didn't have them. Red River had LSU Shreveport. I didn't have A&M San Antonio or Texas Arcana, if I don't remember correctly. And then for Chicagoland, I had St. Francis. I didn't, and Olivia Nazarene I did too, but I didn't have St. Xavier. I didn't have IU South Bend maybe making the case. I didn't have these teams. And even St. Francis, there's a world where they don't get the auto bid. So I just want to take this episode to kind of shine some light on some of these other conferences that I know we haven't really touched on too much this year as we get into the month of February. Because again, February is going to be a big one for everybody involved. We will be recapping and touching back on the regular season championship picture that we touched on, I believe, in the winter time. Just revisiting all the conferences that have 10 or more teams where the first auto bid will come from the number 1 seed. Very excited to talk about that. Touch back on a lot of these conferences that, how things have changed, how things haven't changed, whoever is coming for that number 1 seed. A lot of stuff to deep dive into. So we're gonna be touch on that in a few weeks here. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch y'all in the next one. February, y'all. Conference playoffs are right around the corner. Cannot wait to cover that. Got a lot of fun. Can't wait for the fun to continue.